Hey friends, welcome to another episode of Soulful Producers. My name is Enrique, and today we're going to be talking about making your own washed out or warped out drum loops. This is the kind of drum loop that you would find sometimes in intros, bridges, or outros of songs. Sometimes even in verses, but it's really common to hear these in intros and outros especially. It's the kind of drum loop that sounds very spacey and that really changes the vibe of a song in a moment. It's really useful to know how to make your own, because then you can just take any drum loop, apply some effects, and get that washed out or warped out sound. Okay, so I'm gonna look for a regular drum loop, and then we'll go over the techniques. I like the second one. Yeah, that's got a really good groove. This one is from our collection Soulful Grooves Volume 1. So we're gonna go over 3 techniques to make your own washed out drum loops. The first technique is vibe effects or texture. This is where you take your drum loop and add some plugins to give it a bit more vibe. Something to make it a little more trippy or vintage or even lo-fi. The second technique is adding reverb and really playing with the reverb to get the sound you want. And the third technique is going to be filtering. So really messing with high and low cut filters to get exactly the sound you have in your head. So let's start by adding some texture to this loop. Let's add some RC20 and mess a little with that. I want to get a bit more of a vintage sound and maybe even some stereo width to it just to get some movement around me. So with the noise, I increased the follow so that every time the drums hit, I have a little bit of noise coming through. And that's giving me a bit of a vintage sound to it. Then with the wobble, in stereo mode, it's gonna give me a lot of stereo width and movement around me. And if I move this little selector a little more to the flutter side of things, it's gonna sound a little more wobbly and detuned. That's gonna give me a bit more of a trippy vibe. And then with the distortion, I can really select the frequencies that I want it to be acting on, and that way it's like already sort of filtering the sound a little. It gets a little more body and loses some high end, which is exactly what I want for that vintage sound. And then I can even give it some space, which is like a nice reverb. So that alone already sounds much more interesting than the original drum loop. This is without RC20 and with. Yeah, that's a sick vibe right there. So this is pretty much how I would go about vibe effects and giving it that texture. It's already a lot more interesting and spacey. It has some stereo width, some detuning, and a bit of that vintage vibe. So now with this, I can go ahead and add some reverb to it to really give it that washed out and big sound. Let's go for our classic Valhalla vintage verb. I think everyone has this plugin, so it's gonna be nice and easy to manipulate and for y'all to see what I'm doing. So by bringing the pre-delay down, we're making sure that the drums are coming exactly as soon as they're playing, instead of a few milliseconds later. This is especially important if we're going to have the mix knob over 50%, because that way the wet signal or the affected signal is coming right away. It's not coming a couple milliseconds after. Now I want to find a nice space for it. This concert hall is a little too big. Maybe a room or a plate could be a little nicer. Let's try a plate. So that plate has a bit of a more focused sound. It's a little brighter as well. But by bringing that high cut down, we're really getting a focused, washy sound, which is really nice. I also brought the decay down a bit to make it a little less huge. And that's already sounding a little more like a vibe. And then I can just mess a little more with some more parameters, like the depth and the modulation and stuff like that. Yeah, I'm really liking that right there. Now it's time to use our filters. So I'm just gonna grab any Q and mess with the high and low cut filters on this to get some really nice curves that work really well. Let's start with the high cut. That's pretty nice right there. And notice how I like giving it a bit of a cue, a bit of a resonance. Giving your filters some resonance is gonna make them sound a lot more interesting and a lot more intentional. Because if you don't have that, it's just gonna sound like you're cutting without like really emphasizing anything. Here's what that would sound like. And as I bring it up, it just has a little more character when you start bringing that cue up. Yeah, that's really cool right there. I'm kind of going for that like underwater kind of sound, which is like mainly focused around the mid-range. It doesn't have a lot of high end, so it's a really cool sound right here. And then I'm gonna cut the lows a bit just to see what we can make. Yeah, that's really cool right there. So let's take all the plugins off just to see what we had at first. And now I'm gonna turn on one by one so that you can hear what each one of them is doing. As you can hear, each one of them has their own function, and together the three work beautifully. This is pretty much my go-to technique for making these washed out, warped out kind of drum loops. Just adding some vibe first, then adding some reverb, and then just filtering out to get that really underwater kind of sound. And then if we wanted to get a little crazier, we can maybe add another reverb just to make it sound a little bigger, add some distortion, some saturation, maybe some more vibe effects like chorus and stuff like that. But this is a really great starting point right now. I'm just gonna go a little crazy so that you can see how far we can take it. This is what we have right now. I'm gonna add this chorus by Tal. I love this chorus and it's free. Beautiful chorus sound. I'm just bringing down that mix knob a bit, but it already sounds beautiful right there. Now maybe some Murder Melodies by Slate, just to go a little crazier with that. We can give it some spread to give it some width. Some of this room sound right here. And then some of the modulations and wobble would be really cool. So that's already super trippy right there. I'm just gonna filter this out a little bit and then maybe just bring the amount of Murder Melodies down a little bit because it's a little too much. Yeah, so that's a sick vibe right there. It's got 5 plugins and it's already sounding incredible. Then you can go ahead and print this out. You can export a couple drum loops like these, make your own packs, use these in your own songs, use them for your intros, outros, bridges, verses, even chorus. Like you can go crazy with this and put them wherever you want. And as you just saw in this process, we're starting with a very basic drum loop, like an acoustic drum loop, just some real drums playing a groove. And then with some plugins, you can just take it in any direction. For me and for my taste, it's really about the order of things. So I like to add that vibe and texture first, just to get a nice sound going on. Then I like to add my reverb to wash it out, give it that space. And at the end of that chain, I like to add my filter so that it's controlling everything and giving it that extra touch after the fact. And then once that's sitting right in the mix with a cool vibe, I'll go ahead and add some extra plugins just to go the extra mile. But yeah, that's pretty much my technique for this. I hope you learned a lot from this. I hope you go ahead and do this yourself with any drum loop you find. You can really go crazy with this. Don't forget we have some really cool drum loops at soulfulproducers.com. We have a paid kit called Soulful Grooves Volume 1. It's got a crazy amount of drum loops, drum fills, one-shots, percussions, a bunch of cool stuff. And we also have a free version of that pack, which has some drum loops and some processed drum loops. It's some weird texture that we got by running some of these drum loops through hardware synths and messing with the knobs on the synths. So we got some cool filtering and distortion going on in some of these loops. So be sure to head to soulfulproducers.com. I'm going to leave the link in the description. Check out the packs that we have. Go ahead and grab all our freebies. We have a guitar pack. We have these drum packs. And if you want to support the channel even more, go ahead and grab some of the paid ones. I know you're going to love these. So that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you learned a lot from this, and I'll see you in the next one.